record this meeting so that we can have it available on our YouTube channel for people who couldn't be here but still want to have access to this really great information. Once we start here, I encourage everyone to put your computer on speaker view so that you can then just see our speakers and have the full screen with Dr. Gifford. Regina and I work very closely together to promote the mission of CILU, Citizens for Informed Land Use. CILU is a nonpartisan grassroots Homedale group that's been working since 1998 to protect our open space and natural resources. Over our 22 years of existence, we have been successful at advocating for land use decisions to protect our parks, nature trails, watershed, and ultimately the quality of life in our community. We also promote an informed community, which requires a transparent government. So again, it's for your best experience, put your speaker on Zoom view, which is done by clicking the option on the top right corner of your screen. After Dr. Gifford speaks, there will be time for questions, and you can also use the chat function. It should now be available for anyone to chat with anyone. Dr. Gifford will be discussing his book titled Driving Tomorrow, Our Roadmap to Sustainable Transportation, Infrastructure, and Cities, which he co-authored with David Turok, a PhD, who is also right here on this call now, which is very nice. Dr. Gifford's presentation will describe how to redesign our transportation system using autonomous vehicles and making modifications to the infrastructure for a more sustainable future. Dr. Gifford has a PhD in electrical engineering from Cornell University, and he worked here at Bell Labs for 12 and a half years, then worked at Bell Corps, retired at age 50, then did startups for 15 years. Then, because he had all that time to think about the important issues of our day that he can share with us. Another piece of tidbit, he lived in Homedale for 30 years, so he's one of our own, which, you know, what they say about the prophet is always believed in his own land, but we believe you. We're here to listen to you. He's living in the Adirondacks now in the middle of the mountains, and so a lot more time to think. So thank you, Dr. Gifford. We really look forward to seeing your talk, and we really appreciate you coming and spending time.
Okay, well, thanks to Ginny for inviting me tonight, and thanks to Regina and Karen for setting this up. And thanks to each of you for coming tonight. I hope I can convince you that we can build a fast, fun, sustainable future together. So I'm going to go through things pretty quickly. There'll be time for questions. You can call me or email me afterwards, or you can buy the book. It's available on Amazon. I'm going to go quite quickly. That's my usual style. And so there'll be plenty of time for questions afterwards. So we'll get going. So that's the topic. This is the cover of the book. So how did we get started on this? Well, David had a fascination with electric cars, and that drew me in, as he has so many times over the 32 years we've been working together. Another was problems that seniors face. My dad certainly faced, and watching him, and he moved into a really excellent senior facility, which I'll talk about later. And these were issues that he and other people had there. Another was when I was commuting into Manhattan on the train, I was really bothered by the half hour we wasted in local stops. And every time I rode the train, I tried to think of a way to fix that. So finally came up with a solution, which we'll talk about. And finally was a radio program, which I'll talk about in just a second. An obvious question is, what is the impact of COVID on this? And you'll see as we go through, it really accentuates and even says many of the things we proposed are even better than they were before. I think provides a stronger driving force And there's one addition, which we'll talk about as we go along. So the radio program said that a freight train could carry a pound of oranges all the way across the country on 1 tablespoon of oil. If you think about it, your car can't get out of the grocery store parking lot on 1 tablespoon of oil. And that's a 30,400 to 1 advantage, which is an economy of scale. And from working in telecommunications, that was one of the major driving forces for the success of the Bell system. So the issue is the weight of the car. So you got a pound of oranges, 4,000 pounds of car, and 100 to 200 pounds of us driving. So cars have all sorts of systems oriented towards safety and control and so on. And so we started thinking about how we could reduce that overhead. Transportation has a long history of technology disruptions. Back from horses about 4,500 BC, wheeled vehicles about 3,500 BC. And then in the late 1800s and beginning of 1900, we saw steam engines, trains, cars, and planes. And not much has changed since then other than improvements in those. So, we seem to be stuck. That's exciting. There we go. If you're interested in history and impact of technology, you might look up the Kurgan hypothesis on Wikipedia or elsewhere. Fascinating ideas about the impact of horses and wheeled vehicles. So the question is, what's the next disruptive technology in transportation? Is it electric cars? Is it drones? Is it the scooters that have come along? I was watching a video of what Amazon is doing in its warehouses, and they have these little orange vehicles that are autonomous. They pick up shelves, move them to where they need to have a person choose the whatever they're going to pick to pack, and then take the shelf back to be stored. And I realized that why couldn't that pick up a chair and move it? And I also then realized that I actually had an autonomous vehicle running around my house, the Roomba sweeper. It actually gets better gas mileage or electric mileage than my Tesla, and it vacuums the floor in the process. And as you can see, it can carry all sorts of things. So those were ideas floating around. And so we came up with ideas for having platforms that would pick up things that would move you around, chairs and sofas and beds, or even exercise vehicles. And you could also have it, the intelligence that would guide you along. So if you had a smart cane, if you like, or smart watch or smart glasses, could direct things. And if you look at the impacts that COVID has, you could enclose those. And we talk about this in the book, not for COVID, obviously, but for moving children around or for seniors or other people who need containment. And one of the things you could do is that we've been looking at, David and I have been exploring recently, my system's being slow, is to use UV light at 222 nanometers. Most people think of UV as giving you sunburn, but this is a very short wavelength, and it actually can't penetrate the first layer of your skin or even the moisture in your eye, but it's very effective at combating COVID. And there's actually a fair amount of work now in people using that for in buildings and in transportation systems. So our idea, as I mentioned, was picking up your chair and moving it around for personal mobility, but then you could use smaller platforms and carry food or beverages or even move pills. And one of the challenges my dad had, he was taking about 24 different medications, all with different schedules. and trying to keep track of which ones to take when, and remembering to take them with him when he went out to eat. In the senior facility, they had one meal a day included, and they could go other times. And so that approach to having these autonomous mobility platforms move things around, and with reusable containers, so you don't have the collection of cardboard and wrapping that seem to be filling our houses now with home deliveries. Those vehicles could be very cheap, and when they're mass produced, and you can put many of the smaller vehicles onto the next larger size vehicle. And so now we're getting our economy of scale. So the weight of the vehicle is very comparable to what it's carrying. So we've addressed that weight problem. We now have a mechanism for an economy of scale, which one of the problems with cars and even buses is that there's really not an economy of scale. If you want more capacity, you have to add more cars. Here we can stack things together. Each of those small devices, small vehicles, doesn't go very far very fast. So the next larger one takes it even faster than that. So to take it back to the next step, and we could have even larger vehicles, which now we can, excuse me, you can either ride a vehicle in, or you could walk. And we could also have a layer of the smaller vehicles that move along. And so this one vehicle is providing both personal transportation as well as transportation for these other devices or other. So now let's move on to the challenge of that half hour of stops. And as I said, after years of thinking about the problem, we finally came up with a solution, and it's called continuous convoys with en route sequencing, and you'll see why in a minute. Oh, excuse me. We use a wood stove to heat when we're here, and that makes it quite dry. So when we moved to Long Branch, when we built the place up here and moved away from Homedale, and so it took about 15 minutes to drive to the train station. One of the advantages of Long Branch is it always had parking space there. And it's about an hour and a half to make the 50-mile journey into Manhattan, which was annoying. And so we came up with this idea of continuous convoys and en route sequencing. So you go to the station, and there's a vehicle typically just waiting there for you. And then a convoy approaches, and your vehicle accelerates and joins the front of that convoy. Then as the convoy is moving along, you move to, in this case, the last vehicle. And as the convoy approaches that station that you want to get off at, the last vehicle detaches and you get off and go on your way. And so everybody gets on, goes nonstop, full speed to wherever they're going, and gets off. So we did away with all the stops, and yet we also allowed everybody to get on wherever they wanted and get off wherever they wanted. So I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but basically we saved that half hour. We used half the energy, 6.7 times the capacity. And so that was pretty amazing. So that was in the book. Subsequent to that, when we were in Long Branch, we got flooded by Superstorm Sandy. So we moved to higher ground out to Monroe Township by Englishtown. And so we started thinking about buses, which are the way people commute from out there. And the average bus speed in Manhattan is 5.7 miles an hour. So a lot of times it's actually faster to walk. But it turns out that we could redesign buses to provide this continuous convoy function by rotating the seats and providing the connection from one vehicle to the next. So you could walk through if you need to, or ride in your mobility vehicle. And we can even improve the access with ramps. Notice we went to very large doors, and we would even make these such that the floor of the vehicle matched the curb where you were getting off, so there's no bump there. And we can put a layer on top for the packages, stack that on there that we talked about. And interestingly, that Tesla, in addition to cars, has come out with trucks, which are actually a really interesting model for building these autonomous buses. So where we live now, you typically drive to Route 9, hope you can find a parking spot, which you probably have to pay for, and wait for a bus. With Convoys, you would get onto a bus that was driving near where you live. It would then get on to Route 9 and join a convoy. And as the bus is going along, you now move to the vehicle that's the convoy vehicle that's going to get off nearest where you are. And meanwhile, convoys coming in from other routes are merging with that, so you're getting more people. And then you would merge into the convoy system in Manhattan. So you got on a bus and never had to get off until you arrived where you wanted to be in Manhattan. This turns out to be really saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of energy relative to buses. I don't have time to go through all the details, but basically you're reducing the air resistance by having a long train, long convoy, and you increase the frequency, and importantly, you greatly increase the capacity. It's interesting, the maximum capacity of one lane of a road is about 1,900 vehicles an hour. And that actually peaks at around 50 miles an hour. So the faster you go, the fewer cars you get. So because of the way we're running the convoys, we get a lot more capacity in one lane. And there are other interesting features. So if you look at what would happen in Manhattan, you have all these different entry and exit points, and then you would have convoys running roughly north-south and east-west. And so you get on a vehicle, and then it can get off, that vehicle can turn and get you very close to where you want to be. So if you're following what's happening in a lot of cities around the world, they're going to creating car-free zones. So if you imagine having these convoys running north, south, east, west, you would then have an area with no cars and no convoy vehicles, but we could run package delivery. And so you'd have things delivered to kiosks and shops or even directly to your building. And I don't have time to talk about all that, but I'll give you some idea. Okay, so that's the basic transportation technologies. How does this all fit together? How do you build this into a system? Well, one of the ideas is to enclose the roadways. We call them autonomous ways or A-ways. And a key feature is you exclude all sorts of things, weather and animals and pedestrians and human-driven vehicles. And you contain the noise and the pollution. You provide power to the vehicles, so you get rid of heavy batteries. You can optimize the surface, so you don't need heavy suspensions and tires. And it turns out to be a really good place to put all of the infrastructure. You have easy access to it, as opposed to burying it or stringing it up on the power lines. I'm sure you've all bumped over people digging up the streets to change pipes and wires. So, interesting. So let's look at the costs of those. So if you were using a vehicle, let's say you're using each of those vehicles an hour a day, and you're riding for an hour a day, and the autonomous way is you're using in that, and you're using energy. If you add all of those up, you get what looks like a ridiculously low number. and $172 a year. And you notice that over half of that is the energy. So we've reduced that. And the key there is sharing, that you're only using it for an hour a day. Because it's autonomous, it can then go off and serve somebody else. And the A-ways have very high capacity. That's comparing to almost $9,000 a year for owning a car, and which doesn't include the cost of the roads. So those are pretty aggressive prices, but just to give you an idea. I mentioned that my father lived in a really nice facility just outside of Baltimore. And so there are 2,700 residents on 110 acres. That's 15,000 people per square mile in a really very nice facility. And one of the neat features is he could walk, or we could walk for a mile indoor without backtracking. So how could we build a community that has some of these features and uses the benefits of the transportation system we're talking about? Well, think about, say, the New Jersey Turnpike. You have this long, desolate slab of concrete, noisy, congested. And what if you now build on top of that, use the transportation technology you talked about, and this excellent transportation and infrastructure is going to attract businesses, going to attract commerce, and it's going to attract residents. So what if you stack those up and now you divide the residential neighborhoods into neighborhoods? So yeah, they're connected, but you've divided them so that you have a group of people that actually you'd like to be with. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then those neighborhoods can get together into communities. So several neighborhoods work with communities. And then you have all the services that go along with that: schools and hospitals and healthcare and entertainment. And then you have places for access to shopping. You can think that this is a long shopping mall. And then you have light industry and other businesses that are providing that. So if you imagine this linear city, if I think about what I would like to have, I would like to look out my window and see nothing but natural things: trees and fields and streams and forests and so on, which is partly why we spend the summers in the Adirondacks. But you might want to do something else. You might want to look out and see sports, or you might want to look out and see a French village, or whatever it is you would like to be able to see. Well, just live someplace else on this linear city. And you say, okay, well, how does that work? Well, suppose we had these a mile apart and we had 5,000 people per mile, which is a lot less than what Charlestown was. With this transportation system, you'd have 600,000 people within half an hour. And that's more than all but the 29 largest US cities. So you have this combination of, you're looking out your window at whatever your favorite environment is. When you go out your door, you have a neighborhood of people that are stimulating and interesting to you. When you go from your neighborhood into the community, now you have all kinds of services available to you. And then as you go into the larger city, you have the advantage of universities and libraries and hospitals and all the things that come with large cities. So as a concept, this provides an idea of how we could provide what turns out to be very economical transportation, very economical infrastructure, and the advantages of lower cost construction, because I don't have time to go into the benefits of having this kind of arrangement for construction. And then there are a lot of other things you can do. For example, we have a way of using solar energy for light and heat and power. Today we generate electricity, which we then put very wastefully into light bulbs. What if we just took the sun's light and shone that where we want it? and we can use autonomous systems to move the light around and get whatever you want wherever you want it. So anyway, so there are a whole set of topics that are in the book that obviously I don't have time to go into right now. I'd love to have the time to do that, and you can ask questions about it or look at the book. Anyway, so if you think about what people need and want, if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of going from basic needs up through being able to exercise altruism and spirituality, what we've done is to provide a set of systems and features which address each of those. And all of those are really driven by learning. So one of my favorite topics is learning systems. And right up at the top, I have what I think is one of my better ideas. We live in an active adult community now. Monroe has 14 active adult communities. That's their planning choice of what to attract. And it's funny, the population of the town goes down 30% with all the people going to Florida in the winter. But anyway, so there are a lot of seniors around with time on their hands, often bored out of their gourd. And at the same time, we have kids who really need particular help, guidance, training, etc. What if we paired up kids and seniors and had the seniors read to them and just mutually support each other? One of the things when we were writing the book, we talked about how the transportation system could support that. Interestingly, now with COVID, you can do that virtually. I mean, you have to do it virtually. So it's actually a better idea. I was just on a Zoom call this morning with one of our colleagues in Japan and talking about education. They asked me to give a talk on my education initiatives. So anyway, so we used to have an agrarian society, and now we've paved over an area larger than the state of Georgia, which is mind-boggling. And what we're proposing is we could move to a sustainable future, which gave us a lot of the benefits of what we had in the past without a lot of the problems. So anyway, that's a quick summary. Hopefully, half an hour, what do you know, of the ideas that are in the book. And I'm happy to take questions and see where you want to go.
Thank you. This has been fascinating. I love your continuous convoy. I've always thought that as I was driving along the highway, you know, I'm driving along and everyone's going the same speed. And I always thought, geez, wouldn't it be cool if I could just hook my car to one of those guys and then I could just sit there and they could just drive me up to where I had to go and then bump me off. And I love it. So wonderful ideas that you're providing for us. Okay, so now the floor is open to questions, and I will inviting people to just raise your hand if you have a question, and then I can unmute you. And if you just want to make a comment, I know a lot of you are old friends from 30 years in Homedale. I think a lot of people came just to talk to you. Okay, I see a hand up, and I'm going to Gerald asked to unmute. There you go. So you can unmute yourself. I think it should work.
You're unmuted.
Okay.
Okay. Hi. So Warren, I was envisioning myself as a passenger on one of these continuous convoys, and it seems that I need to be a pretty smart passenger to move my body, and a pretty mobile passenger to move my body to the right unit at the right time, or I will end up in the wrong place. I used to commute into Manhattan, and I would fall asleep on the bus.
Mhm.
And well, I knew I was going to the last stop. But even on the way home, I knew by the feel of whatever, when it was time, I would only nap long enough to get the heights down. And then I would, I never overslept. But people are not so smart. And some of them maybe once used to be smart, but aren't anymore. Or they don't speak the language, or they don't like change. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
So
Great question.
How does that work?
Great observation. Actually, that reminds me when I was going to Swarthmore, and the train went from Philadelphia and made a bunch of stops and stopped at Swarthmore. And the conductor was saying, wah, 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 wah. And you're like, huh? But when they got to Swarthmore, he would say, Swarthmore, Swarthmore. Because he knew that we weren't used to riding the train.
Trains in Italy, I think, are built to have the train splits in half in the middle of the route, and one goes to Milan, and the other one goes to Naples or something, and they yell in Italian, and if you don't understand it, there you are.
If I had more time, I would have gone into that. You basically have two options. Okay, you can either be a walker or a rider. And so that the little personal mobility vehicles, you could just sit down and it would do everything for you. You wouldn't have to think about it. You can speak or Zoom or read or whatever you want to do. If you want to walk, what you would do is you would have what we call an autonomous guide. It could be your smartphone, could be your smart watch, smart glasses, if those come back again, that's telling you, okay, walk this far or go to this car or whatever. And so basically you have that choice. And we talk about in the book, and I talked about, if you have small children, today you've got to drive them, or even if they're going on the subway or something, you have to go with them. So you could put them in one of these vehicles and it would be enclosed, but you could be in video contact with them all the time if you want to, or they could contact their friends. And the same thing for seniors. David and I have done quite a bit of work with people with intellectual disabilities. And so those would people that would need to be, many of them would need to be confined during a trip. So we have that whole range of options. If you remember that slide I had with the chair and the easy chair and the bed, and then the cane and the exercise. So really we provide a lot of options depending on whether you want to walk or exercise or ride or sleep. The system provides you with opportunities for what you want to do. It also has some interesting features that if you're on a longer ride, you could order a coffee or a donut or something and have it delivered to you while you were moving, or you could meet somebody. When I was commuting into New York, you'd often find people who would automatically go to the same place in the same car every day on the same time and play bridge or whatever they were doing. So this would actually allow you to do that. The other thing that I didn't talk about is because the system is so much safer and because it's so much more efficient, you can actually run a lot faster. So if you look at a car going at 50 miles an hour, our convoys could go 300 miles an hour on the same energy. And at 50 miles an hour, or even at 80 miles an hour, we're using less energy than you are with the lights sitting at home. So it's actually better for you to be traveling than to be sitting at home. Anyway, so does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good.
Other questions? Everybody, somebody else? Okay, Saul. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Warren and David, very interesting material. Thank you for sharing with us this evening. I'm a little curious about what your thinking is in terms of where you're trying to take this now, where in terms of, is this something that you're thinking you're trying to find sponsors to build this, get governments interested? Kind of where do you see this from a business and a development perspective?
Very interesting question. What we didn't talk about was 10 years ago, my doctors told me to reduce my stress or else. So I retired from the startup that David and I were running, and I thought that was the end of my career. But I had a lot of time to think about things, and this book is one of the things that came out. I'm not up to doing another startup, although David and I actually have a little one going now. But anyway, so the suggestion was to get the ideas out there and see if people would pick them up. And what I'm hoping is that through this kind of interchange with energetic, interested people, that somebody is going to pick this up. We're happy to support that. I see a lot of possibilities of how this could happen. I was doing some work with a couple of schools and hoping they would pick it up, and the students, didn't go that way. Anyway, so I'm happy to talk about ways of getting started if that's of interest to you or others. I can see an architect. There's a lot of interesting work going on. In Paris has this concept of 15-minute cities. Everything should be within 15 minutes. Our system would actually do that quite nicely. So I can imagine a city that is completely overcrowded with cars. Washington, D.C., I don't know what it still is now with COVID, but was having horrible problems with trucks double parked doing deliveries. So putting in a package delivery system, for instance, with elevated A-ways for small vehicles. So anyway, part of the reason for giving this talk is to hopefully find people who are interested in pursuing something like this.
I got Mike Nicholas asked a question. Unmute yourself, and then Eric, you'll be next. Unmute yourself, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Warren, great topic, great subject, great information. Appreciate it. I had the unfortunate pleasure of commuting into Manhattan for 28 years on New Jersey Transit. Took the North Jersey coastline every day. I understand, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and how to solve it from a government point of view, from a private citizen point of view, and I see a lot of opportunities to fix the problem. And look, the end of the game, you want to get less people off the road and more people using mass transit to get to where they go. Recently, with COVID, with the pandemic, you see car sales in Monmouth County are up 400%. More people are driving to wherever they have to go. Less people want to get on a crowded train. Less people want to get on a crowded bus. No one wants to sit. I mean, you know what those New Jersey Transit trains are like. You get on a train and you're next to somebody and there's no social distancing on trains. My first question is, how do you see the future of that being fixed and being addressed, getting more people on trains? Because I know a lot of elderly people in Monroe, in Howell, in Freehold Township, and in those adult communities, they will not get on a train. They will not get on a bus. And how do you fix that? How do we make that better? And what would you say to people that think the future? I mean, look, between the Portal Bridge and the failure of the Gateway Tunnel project being not being implemented, how would you respond to being fixed by privatization of our rails, because the North Jersey coastline carries all of New Jersey Transit. If you look at the numbers,
Yep.
it carries all the other lines because it's the highest volume. So how would privatization fix that? Do you think so?
Very interesting question. Done a lot of thinking about sort of how to get from here to there. Another thing that David and I are in the process of proposing, I mentioned this UVC, 222 nanometers. There's work going on now to have these UV lights run across the top of the train and then blow air across it. So that's one way of improving the safety. The other thing we've been looking at, my daughter recently died of COVID-19, so a particular
I'm very sorry.
interest of, so our family is, we don't go any place that's has other people. Anyway, that we're looking at actually a mask system that then uses UVC to filter both your intake air and also your outtake air, so you're not infecting somebody else. So I think that's one approach to this. Hopefully the vaccines are going to help as well, but it's a real challenge. I think the bus system in Manhattan is appalling. One of the challenges I see with the trains is you basically have to rebuild them to make it easy to walk through. And you know, you've been in those cars, they're not spending money on that. So it's going to take money to be spent. And the tracks are in bad shape anyway. I mean, I would really love to have those trains go 120 miles an hour instead of 40. So I think it's challenging to get that investment. And it's why I was excited I'd never ridden buses to commute on. I only did trains for a variety of reasons, but I can see private systems building buses to do this. And as I mentioned, the Tesla buses or Tesla truck is a really interesting vehicle for driving them. If you think of, well, anyway, without going into details. So I think that's really a more, an easier transition, that somebody could just start doing that. And if you could get into Manhattan in an hour and be from where you wanted to get on to actually delivering you into the city, that would be very attractive. If you time the lights, we can do it even faster. So unfortunately, I think that's an easier transition. I'd love to see the trains do that, but the North Jersey coast tracks are not in good shape. A lot of investment. One of the challenges, those cars are really heavy. One of the reasons we want the roadways is you have a lot of problems with winds, things. You have to make sure they don't get blown over. You have pedestrians or animals and so on. There's weather, benches are frozen.
Anytime.
So enclosing the roadways actually is a tremendous benefit. So it's a real challenge. Anyway, great question. Real challenge. Happy to talk with you. As I said,
I would love to. Yeah, I would love to talk to you offline. Thank you.
There was another question. Eric, did you have a question? I'm getting a note that's saying my internet is, the bandwidth is low. And I saw people's pictures and they're losing them. You're still there, Warren, right?
Yes.
Okay, Eric,
Actually,
you have,
David just told me he could show a prototype, couple of our prototype masks if people were interested.
oh, yeah. Yeah, that'd be good. And then Eric has a question.
Go ahead.
Where's David? I have to,
David, you want to unmute?
yeah, David has to unmute and then, I don't know if he has the ability to share his screen, but,
Thank you.
hi, okay. Can
Very
you,
difficult to be muted. As Warren will tell you, I probably talk a lot or maybe sometimes too much. So thank you for freeing my tongue. And hello, everyone.
my pleasure.
Great talk, Warren, as always. There's some very interesting new slides there that I hadn't seen in a bit. So thank you. What did you want? Show you some of the masks, perhaps?
Yeah, show some of that.
Do you see that little green box at the bottom to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so you can just do that.
Actually, I'm going to show and tell the old-fashioned way.
Oh.
So these
oh.
are various things that we've worked with that have been used for all kinds of things like Ebola and so on. These are, the first set is something very simple. It's just a respirator's mask that people use in construction facilities. And you can combine them with these OSHA NIOSH cartridges, which are P100, right? So you're talking about, you hear people talk about N95 filtration. These are actually 100. It's not 100% filtration. It's 99.92 or something to that effect. And then one of the early adaptations was that this is something that's made by 3M Corporation that we've adapted in a couple of ways. To just put the filter elements on it so you can see the way that this works. And this is another version, right, which covers the entire face and eyes. It's very effective for me because I love to poke myself in the eye and rub my eyes during the day and so on. And these filtration elements actually are both, they're P100 each, and so they're very low resistance to breathing. If you ever tried to breathe through a N95 mask when it's secure around the face, it really cuts back on your breathing. You're rebreathing some of your own exhalatory breath and so on. And so some people find them very uncomfortable. This is a little uncomfortable, but the seal is rubber and it makes a good seal around the face. And then, so the problem with this version was that you can buy these commercially if you can find the right pieces. So the inhalatory is pulled through here, which is better than breathing it in someone's face, but it's not as good. So the third version actually has all of that plus an exhalation valve that's also P100. So it's filtering what you're taking in at the 99.92 level, and it's also filtering what you're breathing out, right? And so there have been several variants of these that we've worked on, including one that we grabbed the UV light. UV light's not here.
One of the things we've been working on is that it's important to see the person's face while they're talking. A significant fraction of communication is actually the facial. So you really need something that provides clear to the face. And another thing is that you wind up with your voice being muted. So what we're looking at is using your smartphone to actually filter the voice to make it sound natural. Go ahead, David.
I was going to actually show the UV tube, but it's actually not here. I actually loaned it out for someone who needed to disinfect a whole bunch of masks. But if you can imagine one of those masks going through a filtering tube that has the 222 nanometer light bulb in it, it actually filters the incoming air as well. So it basically doubly kills off the virus. The problem with even N95 or N100, here's a P100 filter, right, is that these things really don't filter at the level where they capture a virus. What they're capturing is water droplets and aerosols, which the viruses are riding on. But the UV light actually kills the virus dead in its tracks. It prevents it from being able to replicate. So it basically sterilizes the virus. So we've had some interesting times working with that too.
I am sorry, guys. Can you I could hear you, David, but I can't see anybody anymore. I don't know, my computer, they say I'm having bandwidth issues.
Oh, sorry, we're hearing you very well.
Okay, and you can see me
Seeing
and
other
everybody
people.
else can see people?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, good. So other people can see, all right. Because I was thinking maybe I would stop recording and then maybe start again or something.